even back then and beyond. And so it's just amazing that we're at this place now. I mean, a lot of us did not think we would be here. It's true that the announcement of SB1029 came as a surprise to everybody, including myself at that time. And but what excitement it has generated. And I think the key point that I have repeat over and over, although the Press Democrat never really did this for me when I told him is my key point, which is the vision, this grand vision that we talk about in terms of that connectivity between the Bay Area, Marin County, Sonoma County, Mendocino County, Humboldt County is amazing, and there's a long arc to that. There's going to be a lot of work to that. There's going to be a lot of agency work and stakeholder work and all that stuff coming together. In what I would say our lifetime is really the community connectivity that we're talking about. And so what Hank talked about here today about all those connections that he's talking about within our sphere, those discussions are happening in Mendocino County, they're happening more in Sonoma County, they're happening more in Marin County. And so this vision is really starting off with those connectivities between communities, and that's what we're really going to, that's where the work is right now, in terms of what we really have to be getting down and working hard on. And so I really appreciate everyone being here and working on that. The broader vision, that's coming, and you should all be encouraged by that and working on that too. But right now we're connecting communities, and you can see it all around you. And so I just want to really, this is my opportunity to ask you all to give a big round of applause to Mike McGuire and all his work on this. I want to point out that it wasn't, the reason we were all so surprised is because it took a certain bravery, and it's like a bravery of common sense at that point. But it was a threshold of discussion that we really couldn't quite get past, and we're now past that threshold, and we're moving forward. And I thank you all for the support of this vision. And I want again to thank Mike McGuire and his staff. They've all been working very, very hard on this, and that's what I got. So this is my intro. It's like so weird to do an intro between you're talking, but this is the awkward situation Mr. McGuire has put me in. So
yeah, exactly. And ladies and gentlemen, I am offended that we have no Wookiees here today, as it is May the 4th. So come on, my goodness. Especially in the land of Star Wars here on the North Coast. We also want to say thank you to Humboldt State for allowing us to be able to host here in the Cape Buchanan Room. Thank you. And we want to acknowledge all of the nonprofits who are here, governmental agencies focusing on issues of trails, and let's give them a round of applause. So everyone should have received a gold agenda in front of you. What we'd like to be able to do is go through the agenda, and I will be the first to admit it's going to be a bit of a deep dive and a little wonky. And it's that way because we want to make sure that we are giving you all the information all at once, all in one morning. So if it would be okay with everyone, we'd like to be able to start that deep dive right now and talk about the momentous occasion this is for Northern California. We are here at the formal launch of the transition from the bankrupt North Coast Railroad Authority to the creation of a world-class trail system that will stretch from the coastal waters and redwoods of Humboldt Bay to overlooking one of the storied cities of the world, the bustling waters of San Francisco Bay.
Oh yeah.
We wanted to be able to start it right here in Humboldt, to be able to give all of you the first real community-wide look at what the Great Redwood Trail could be, how we got here, where we're going, and where we're going to be headed in the future. In all three of those steps, you have our commitment. The number one priority is community will be with us every step of the way, and community input, being active and engaged in this process. The grand vision of the Great Redwood Trail is to create an incredible experience along the 300-mile-long dilapidated former NCRA rail between San Francisco Bay and Humboldt Bay, and using the rail as the right-of-way as the base. And I've got to tell you, we are off to one hell of a start. First things first, we have always known that creating the Great Redwood Trail was not going to be quick, and it's definitely not going to be easy. There is a lot of work ahead of us over the next many years, and it's going to take time to do this right. And we need to work through a slew of details with each and every one of you up and down this 300-mile railway. Today, we're going to hear from outstanding trail experts, including Laura Cohen from the National Rails to Trails Conservancy and Kevin Wright, who many of you have worked with here in Humboldt. Then we're going to open it up for the most important part of today's town hall, and that's to hear from all of you, your feedback, your concerns, your criticisms, as well as conversation. So let's get into it. Where have we been? For 2 decades, before NCRA was even conceived of in 1992, railroads fell on hard times around the nation, and right here on the North Coast. We saw a succession of bankruptcies and rail companies closing here on the North Coast as Highway 101 was improved, trucking became cheaper, natural resources became scarcer, and maintaining the railroad became significantly more expensive. Stitching together money from a variety of sources, the state created the North Coast Railroad Authority, NCRA, in 1992, and it was a valiant effort to save freight rail right here in Humboldt and Mendocino counties. But NCRA faced extreme headwinds, the exact same challenges that the private railroads faced the preceding decades. And after severe flooding and slides, the federal government shut down the North Coast Railroad in 1998. NCRA was never able to recover, and there hasn't been a train north of Willett since. And I'm going to be blunt. NCRA was a complete failure. I won't go any further into the deeply troubling history, but we'll say this. They have dug themselves into a hole that they're never going to be able to get out of. They owe millions and millions of dollars and failed in their single mission. And it's time for us to be able to move forward and protect the transportation corridor for future generations, which is why we are moving forward today with the Great Redwood Trail. So let's talk about where we're at now. Let's be really clear. And again, I am not trying to upset anyone in this room, and I want to hear your feedback. But I want to be clear. Rail is not going to come back to the North Coast in any form anytime soon. Many private freight rail companies have looked at the possibility of starting a line. They have never pulled the trigger. They have never pulled the trigger because they can't make it work financially. They're in the business of making money. It's been an entire generation since Humboldt has seen a freight train running, and there's lots of good reasons for that. A lot of smart, a lot of talented, and a lot of wealthy folks have tried time and time again to bring freight rail to the North Coast, and it has failed every time. Rail is simply not a financially viable option. And I also know my words are making some folks upset, and it's also disappointing a lot of folks. But I also believe it doesn't come as a surprise, and I never want to lead anyone on. We need to give credit, though, where credit is due. NCRA did a fantastic job of preserving the 300-plus mile-long transportation right-of-way in the face of numerous odds and obstacles. This was no easy feat, and they do deserve credit. And just because there hasn't been a train for more than 2 decades, and certainly won't be for the foreseeable future, doesn't mean this is a one-of-a-kind. This is a one-of-a-kind, irreplaceable transportation corridor that must be kept whole and viable for future generations to enjoy. So that gets us to, where the heck are we going with the Great Redwood Trail? This right-of-way, candidly, is now in grave danger. It's in grave danger of being carved up and lost forever. There is only one way to preserve this right-of-way, and that's rail banking. We intend to rail bank the entire rail line from Cloverdale to Samoa over the next several years. It's the only way that we're going to be able to save the corridor. Rail banking is just what it sounds like. Banking rail so that it stays a transportation corridor forever and cannot be broken up, with the added benefit that it could be turned into a trail. This has been done hundreds of times. hundreds of times across America, which has created thousands of miles of trails, which have now become economic drivers for the communities the trail winds through. So let's take a deeper dive into rail banking and to describe exactly what it's going to do. In the 1970s and early 80s, railroads all across the nation were going out of business, just like they were here on the North Coast. Congress, they were worried that these transportation corridors would be abandoned and sold off and lost forever. And once you lose a transportation corridor, it's impossible to get it back, right? So Congress came up with the rail banking program in 1983. This far-sighted policy allowed community groups and trail organizations, like folks who have gathered in this room today, allowed them to be able to work with railroad track owners to preserve the rail line forever by placing hiking, biking, riding, and equestrian trails on top of the rails. Under this law, and this law exists today, the trail can exist and be used until such time that it's possible for a freight rail company to be able to start up service again. Out of the roughly 800 rail banking projects throughout the country, train service has restarted 11 times. The remaining 789 continue to be trails. Here's the great thing about rail banking. It's saved for all time. So that's what we're going to do here on the North Coast. Save it for all time. We would like to be able to give some real examples of how rail banking, transitioning rails to trails, has worked and candidly has transformed communities in every corner of this great nation. And I got to tell you, rail banking has transformed, in particular, rural communities in every corner of America. And to be able to talk to us all about it, we are so grateful that we have Laura Cohen here today. And Laura's going to start making her way up to the podium. She is going to be talking to us about all issues of rails to trails, how it works, and we'd like to be able to provide you with a video of how a community has transformed itself by transforming once a bustling commercial railway into a world-class trail system. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give a warm North Coast welcome to Miss Laura Cohen.
Let's move you over here so you can get better. People can see us. Beautiful.
Good morning. It's nice to be here. I wanted to thank Senator McGuire for the invitation to take part, and amazing what a turnout, how much support you have. Your dedicated organizations and leaders and the agencies who have done such hard work over many years. It's really impressive, and I'm so excited about the big vision for a trail system here in Humboldt County, as well as obviously this huge vision for the Great Redwood Trail. So kudos to all of you. And you know, I have worked with some folks for a very long time, Jen Rice and Marcella Clem and Emily Sinkhorn, and a shout out to the friends of the Annie and Mary, because I know how long you've been at it. And I admire your persistence and dedication, because as you well know, if you're into like instant gratification, then trail work is not the field for you. So thank you all for your dedication. And I've also worked quite a bit with Senator McGuire's amazing staff, and Jason Lyles in particular, through moving SB1029 through the legislature, and just smart and strategic and hardworking. So you're so fortunate to have that quality of folks representing you. So just really impressive. Thank you for your hard work. So I'm going to give like a little secret, like signal to Jason. We're going to see if we can do this dance together. So Rails to Trails Conservancy, I know some of you are familiar with us, some perhaps not. So we're a national nonprofit organization founded in 1986. And this is our mission, where we work with communities to create networks of trails. And you know, as you can tell from our name, our original mission started from this opportunity of all the miles of rail corridor that were being abandoned. And a lot of light bulbs popped in a lot of people's heads around the country, like, wow, when they make great trails, because they, they're not very steep, they go right through a lot of communities. And so that was the founding of our organization. So here's a little bit what overview of what I'm going to address today, and just a little bit of history on the rail trail movement and how this all got started. So at the peak of the rail system in the United States, there were over 250,000 active miles of railway. And this is what that map looked like. You can see a lot more density in the Midwest and East, and not so much in the West, but we certainly had a fair amount of miles in the West Coast too. And so today, well, I guess this is probably accurate as of a couple of years ago. There's about 140,000 miles. So from 250,000 to 140,000. And the primary reason, of course, is the advent of the national highway system and the big shift to trucking as a way to move goods. So it was, primarily just economically driven, the rise of the trucking industry and the corresponding shrinking of the railroad industry. And so, one of our co-founders, the idea of for our organization was really kind of a repurposing, like, wow, all this great corridor that connects so many communities, wouldn't that make great trails, and for linking a great trail system? So that was kind of the idea. So when we started in 1986, there were about 250 miles of rail trails across the country. And by 2017, and I want to make clear, we do not take credit for that. We helped and worked with many communities that did a lot of the day-to-day work, but we kind of helped make a movement out of it and provide the kind of resources and the policy support and helped create the funding sources to make that possible. So it's a huge partnership with a lot of communities to make this happen. So in terms of number of trails, so that's about 1,900, almost 2,000 trails, and there's over 700 underway, so we're going to be well over 2,000 rail trails pretty soon. And this is what it looks like, and I should mention that next week we're actually launching on May 8th. We're announcing a big vision of a national route, the Great American Rail Trail, which will link the East Coast to Washington State and try to link a lot of those blank spaces together. So keep a lookout for that. We'll be doing a lot of social media on that. So that's kind of another big idea. So I just want to talk a little bit about what we do. So we partner with a lot of communities on trail projects, usually in the planning phase. We're not a construction company, so we usually kind of help it get started and get it to the point where you have funding to construct the trail. We also do policy work. We're kind of an advocate on behalf of the trail community in Congress and state legislatures around the country. We promote and celebrate trails. We have a website called traillink.com to help you find great places to walk and bike. I should probably add a fourth one, which is that we defend some of the policies that make it all possible, like the rail banking law, which was originally created as a corridor preservation strategy, and our general counsel goes to court, sometimes the Supreme Court, to defend some of those policies on behalf of the rail trail movement. So we've done a lot of that work as well. And so our technical assistance to communities, community engagement, and making sure that there is a robust conversation with the community to get your questions, your concerns. Is this project meeting your needs? And also, is it meeting your hopes and visions? What are your great ideas for how this could make your quality of life better? That's a hugely important part of this whole process, and you've got to do that right. And I know Senator McGuire is really committed to that. Actually, go back one, Jason. Trigger happy there. Slow down. He's so excited. He's just, it's hard to keep him calm. I know that Senator McGuire is committed to a real meaningful dialogue and how this project rolls out. So we provide technical assistance on things like rail banking or just other technical issues that come up with rail trails and rail-to-trail conversions. We help communities secure funding. So this is a picture of the skunk train down in Willits, and so one of the things in the past year that we did, we worked with the city of Willits. They had unsuccessfully applied for active transportation program funding for this really great rail trail project that would go right through the heart of their community and give folks an opportunity to get off of Main Street, which was the highway, and have a safer place to bike and walk, connecting schools and their senior center. So we worked with them. We helped do a survey, bilingual survey, and create a map, and worked with them on developing a really strong application. We're so excited that in January they finally got their $6.2 million from the active transportation program to do that project. So we love those stories with happy endings, and this piece is part of the Great Redwood Trail, so it's already funded, and that will be getting underway. So Ukiah and other places are taking the steps to make it all happen. Go ahead. And so we have a lot of resources that we put out there on our website to share for anybody who wants to find them. So Trail Link, this is the kind of Trail Finder website for trail users. Just check it out. It's also as a Android and iOS app. We put out a quarterly magazine that's great profiles of what's happening all around the country and destinations that you might want to consider. We have a trail building toolbox. As you can imagine, doing trail work all across the country, there's some common themes that come up almost all the time in building trails. Safety and privacy and crime and good design and how do you manage multiple uses, and all those things have been kind of wrestled with by many other communities, so there's a lot of great lessons learned and you don't have to reinvent the wheel, so we try to share those strategies and success stories. We do webinars, we have technical expertise on rail banking and things like that. Right? We also do a lot of reports, fact sheets, and studies on the topics that keep rising to the surface. Economic impact analysis, safe communities, State of the Trails report. And this report that we did back in, let's see, 2011 is not, I think it's more recent than that, but walking and bicycling in small towns in rural America, because there's not a lot of data on that, and I think there's sometimes a lot of assumption that, there's not a lot of walking and biking in rural communities, so we just don't have to pay attention to that. And this report demonstrated that was completely wrong. And so we share resources like that to help kind of make the case and get some data behind that so that we can actually tell the story better. So one of the issues that comes up all the time is, how can this really support the local community and in particular local business? And there's just a lot of anecdotal data and stories that we've collected in some of our reports about how trails attract visitors and visitors spend money at local businesses. So a lot of great examples to share about that. A lot of kind of visitor-serving businesses, beds and breakfasts, bike shops, coffee places, small restaurants, have in places where there's a trail come to rely on the trail business in a very significant part. The Katy Trail is a real long-distance trail in Missouri, and over the years it's been a real important economic generator, and this person said it's the golden goose. So that's been a boost to many of the small towns and communities that it goes through. I think it's about a 150-mile trail. Some other examples of long-distance trails that include, going through many rural communities is the Great Allegheny Passage, 150 miles from Pittsburgh to Cumberland, Maryland, and then from there it connects to a C&O towpath, canal towpath. Took a while to piece this whole thing together. Should be some text on there. Is there Oh, there we go. So this is some of the benefits that have been measured on the Great Allegheny Passage. Yeah, go ahead. Just for Allegheny County, which is a portion of that, it brings 100,000 tourists each year, contributing $2.5 million to local economy. So that's a more urban area than here, but you can just see that it can have a real impact. Another economic impact analysis included a 25-mile trail. It gives you an idea of, in these surveys, it can often measure, ask people when you come, do you buy things, do you spend money, and how much is it, and where do you go, and do you stay overnight, and so they can actually try to quantify the local impact on business for that, from that trail and the trail users. This is the Katy Trail I mentioned before, 237 miles, and annual economic impact estimated at $18 million, and creating a real job generator. I wanted to mention this idea of trail towns. So the idea is basically marketing your community as a trail destination, and there are actually formal programs that have been created to support that idea. And they focus on improving connectivity and level of services and amenities, and creating a culture of hospitality and stewardship. So there's a lot of different organizations that are doing this, that have been around for 5 to 10 years. And the one that's probably best known, next slide, is the Trail Town program, which revitalizes rural communities by growing outdoor tourism and small business. And so they started on the East Coast and Pennsylvania area, but they provide national support, and they have measured their progress through jobs created, funds invested, trail counts, and economic research. So there are some great resources to help think about, how can we position some of the communities along the Great Redwood Trail to benefit from visitor tourism. Safety, also obviously a huge issue in creating trails. We try to collect a lot of good resources for how this has been done well. And we had one study where we surveyed 372 trails around the country and got a lot of really good feedback from county sheriffs and local police. And the overwhelming response was that, especially when you're building a trail in a place where it's been an abandoned corridor, where it's been kind of really a magnet for dumping and loitering, and not the kind of uses you want to encourage, and you create it and develop it as a trail, you have the eyes on the trail. The legitimate uses tend to chase out the illegitimate uses. So certainly that's been the case in almost all ways. I think that there's a little
We have about 2 minutes.
Okay. Very little evidence that the trail was actually attracting any crime. Go ahead. So one of the really beautiful, successful trails here in California is Biz Johnston Trail in Susanville, 25 miles on former logging railroad. Attracts a lot of people to their annual Rail Trail Festival in fall color. It's just a beautiful trail you should check out. It's a great success story, also in a very rural area of California. There's us enjoying a ride on it. That's my husband and my daughter, and you can tell how old that photo is because she's in college now. Go ahead. So as I mentioned, we were enthusiastic supporters of Senate Bill 1029, and worked with Senator's office and notified our members all across California to write letters in support, and generated hundreds of letters, and we were happy to do so. We have a national Rail Trail Hall of Fame program where we name every year one additional trail that just is of the kind of world-class example of a great project, and we see the Great Redwood Trail has Hall of Fame written all over it. We would love to see to come here and award the Hall of Fame designation to the Great Redwood Trail. So we look forward to doing that. And if I'm not mistaken, I think it would be the longest rail trail in the country. And that's a pretty amazing thing. So thank you for your work. We look forward to supporting you. Thank you for inviting me.
So ladies and gentlemen, we have a short 3-minute video. A short 3-minute video of what a trail has done for a rural community in Middle America. Let's go to the video, please.
When you are on the trail and when you are on the river, it doesn't feel like you're in a city at all. It feels like you're out in the wilderness.
I've taken people out onto the trails and their mouth drops open when they see the beauty along the river.
That's really, for me, what makes Morgantown so great. It just feels like home.
This is a way of getting them off the beaten path, get them on these trail systems to see our communities and what it's like to live a rural life in a small community.
I've seen a huge change. It is the heart of our community.
The Industrial Heartland Trails Coalition is a remarkably ambitious project that is now over 50% complete. When completed, it'll cover more than 1,500 miles of trails. It'll run through 51 counties and 4 states. But it's not just about the trail itself. It's about the communities those trails connect.
One of the great things is our people. It's a very can-do spirit, get involved spirit.
We're minutes from gorgeous farmlands, seconds from rivers.
My hope is that we continue to tell the world about our beautiful area, our beautiful trails, and become a place where everybody wants to come and live or visit.
What was old Appalachian America? What was it? Founded on river and rail, right? We needed the water and the river for industry, and now those things are going. It's time to reuse those in a different way to keep the new asset, which is the people.
Big industry was here, big industry left, and the rebirth and regrowth has been fully utilized by the tourism industry to experience that beauty and the natural resources we have.
A lot of these towns, they get a real boost when these trails come in. People that ride these trails need businesses that serve them.
A lot of people from New York City, from DC, from Cleveland, you see them coming here to enjoy the trails.
That means they're going to stay at those towns. That means they're going to eat at those towns. They might need to get their bike fixed at those towns. They might want to go shopping at those towns.
The return on investment is really significant, not just in terms of tourism dollars, but in terms of quality of life for our citizens, and in terms of making our community a place where families and businesses want to locate.
Young families, they want to bring their children up in a healthy community, and a big part of that is the trails.
Honestly, I didn't even know what a rail trail was before coming here, but it quickly has become a really nice feature, a draw for us.
I grew up in Maryland, and I only drove through West Virginia. I never stopped. It's a hidden gem. I think if you're part of something bigger like this, it will introduce people to our community.
If there was a trail that went from here to Pittsburgh, that would be my next vacation. Sign me up. I love it.
Creating this trail system that is the Industrial Heartland Trail Coalition is a big job. We can't do it by ourselves. It's going to take a lot of people of all kinds of backgrounds working together to make this vision a reality.
The Great Redwood Trail is in the shadow of 9 million people. 9 million people in the San Francisco Bay Area. And imagine what they have done in Ohio and West Virginia, what we could do here for the Great Redwood Trail and the economic benefits our communities will be able to benefit from those visitors. To be able to do a deeper dive on this issue, we now would like to be able to bring up Kevin Wright. Kevin is going to be, he's formerly of Humboldt, now of Marin, and we are working with all 4 counties of the Great Redwood Trail. Kevin is going to be talking to us about potential designs of the trail, how designs are determined. He's going to give us some examples of trails in different topographies and how trail uses are determined, ensuring long-term compatibility. Ladies and gentlemen, another North Coast welcome to the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Kevin Wright.
Good morning. Good morning. I'm fired up. I think between Laura and Hank, we have the picture. And what I'm actually going to do is take the dry erase board eraser and wipe off all the beautiful trails, and we'll show what's going on behind the scenes and get into the nuts and bolts. So, not to get you all too excited, but we're going to start out with 2 slides giving sort of the regional context of this trail. And again, you know, for those of you, I lived here for 15 years, and I worked with Emily Sinkhorn at RCA, planning and building trails, and worked with, you know, probably half of you out there on various trail projects. And I really loved everybody. But for those of you who have been here for 40, 50, you know, et cetera years, and have really wanted this for a very long time, this is really an amazing thing happening today. So I just want to acknowledge that and thank Senator McGuire for all of his leadership on what's happening. 280 miles of rail trail connecting the Larkspur Ferry Terminal, which connects to San Francisco, and the East Bay up to Humboldt Bay. One thing I want to point out is, you know, 19 major trestles, 38 bridges, 42 tunnels, the longest tunnel being over 4,000 feet. That is radical. And we'll show some existing conditions in a second, but I just want to point out one of the early important steps beyond robust public engagement is going to be an engineering analysis, because that is a lot of infrastructure, and we're going to want to know what we can use and what we can't, and if not, how to get around those major costs of rebuilding that stuff. So linear maps never fit well on PowerPoint slides, but here it is. You can see Eureka and actually the Andy Murray Trail way up top and all the way down at the bottom, the Larkspur Ferry Terminal. One thing to emphasize about this, at the southern end, there is the SMART railway line. This is a commuter rail. SMART stands for the Sonoma-Marin Area Rapid Transit. It's actually a train I take to work every day. There are a lot of segments along that rail line that are constructed. That's part of this vision, as well as what's happening here on the North Coast. There are a ton of communities along this rail line, and in a moment I'm going to show you a slide that talks about how many different pieces along this regional vision are actually constructed already, or at least planned. So there's already a lot happening. And you know, I feel like I learned from many of you, so there are a lot of experts in the room, but I'm also grateful to say that all along this railroad line in these different communities, there are a lot of experts in these different communities, and together I think we can really make this vision happen relatively quickly. It doesn't need to be 40 or 50 years from now.
Kevin, have you eat the mic if you don't mind?
Oh, eat the mic.
Yes.
Yes. In fact.
There's some problems in the back.
I'm better just walking around, so I'll do it this way. All right, so comparable trails. I'm going to point out 2 of these. You know, Laura's presentation was great. There are a lot of trails that have come before this one. You know, that map of all those red little squiggly worms across the whole country. That's pretty amazing. There are 2 I want to point to that actually, both aren't exactly rail trails. The first is the Pacific Crest Trail, which probably all of you are familiar with. And the PCT is a great model for 2 reasons. One, it took tremendous local, state, and federal political leadership to make it happen, to really bring it together. And so that's already happening with the Great Redwood Trail, and I just want to acknowledge that. The other thing about the PCT, if you read about the history, there's incredible volunteer involvement from start to finish. And so in the early days with the YMCA and local recreation clubs, they were out there scouting trail alignments, they were organizing and getting people engaged in the vision, and we're going to need that for the GRT. After all's been said and done and the trail's complete, they're still out there, they're helping people navigate the many, thousands of miles from Mexico to Canada, and they're also making sure that the trail's well cared for, that there's stewardship going on there, and that people are being safe and that private property is being respected. The other one is the California Coastal Trail, and it wasn't too long ago that RCAA actually worked with the State Coastal Conservancy and looked at gaps in Humboldt and Delaware counties and figured out, what are the route alignments? How do we fill in these gaps to make this a complete trail from north to south and south to north? And I just want to point that out because the State Coastal Conservancy has been a great partner with local agencies and local communities. Unlike some state agencies that are very limited in staff, they actually have people here walking trail alignments, meeting with local community members, and really getting to know the local conditions. And so that's been a really excellent model. The other thing about the Coastal Trail is that it's similar in nature to the Great Redwood Trail in that it has very urban components. I mean, Venice Beach, for instance, like you're hanging out and somehow they built a skate park out in the beach. I don't know how that happened, but so there are these very urban components, and then there are also these very rural components like the Eel River Canyon that we'll talk about. So it has a real mix. So as I mentioned, there are a number of chunks of this vision in this corridor that have already been completed, or at least planned, and here's a whole list of them from north to south. And so it's not like we're just starting out planning the whole thing and nothing's been done. In fact, there's a lot that's already been done. And just a note about this planning. So I feel like everything that Hank presented that's happened locally is just an outstanding model for how this can unfold regionally. That there's been real thoughtful planning. There's sort of three key elements that stood out to me. And one is the incredible innovation that's happened locally and thinking about how to piece these things together. It's been community coming together to have conversations about what this can look like and how it can meet everyone's needs and serve multiple benefits. And then all of these trails require perseverance. They don't just happen tomorrow. You don't just float a state bond and suddenly, billions of dollars are floating into one small community to fund a trail segment. It really takes a lot of creativity and thinking about how can we work together to fund this and plan this and make it happen. So a few slides on existing conditions. Some of you have actually probably boated this segment. Maybe you've hiked it. This is the Eel River Canyon. We're going to start here because this is one of the more rustic segments. And you can see the amount of infrastructure. These are some of the bridges. That tunnel up there is full of dirt. It would take a lot of volunteers to dig that out. So, as you boat the Eel River Canyon, there are a lot of examples of this where there have been major blowouts of culverts. The tracks are just literally hanging over. And I just want to, again, point to the multiple benefits piece. So it's not just about trail access. It's also about restoring the environment, providing clean water, and also, in a lot of cases, providing emergency access. So you talk about benefits to neighboring landowners. When you have conditions like this, there's no access, unless you go in there in a boat or, you fly a plane over. The road systems are very limited, and so improving access along the trail can also provide other benefits to neighboring landowners as well as trail users. There are a lot of relics out there as well that are fun to look at, so these will be a part of the planning process, considering what to do with this stuff. And then here are just a few more shots of the corridor itself. And then, similar to Humboldt Bay, as you go south, you can see there's the Smart Railroad corridor. You begin to have more paved infrastructure. Here's an amazing tunnel that took a lot of leadership to get down to the Larkspur Ferry Terminal in Marin. So you begin to see more of the built environment pieces. The entire trail is not going to look like this. It's not going to all be paved. There's not going to be lighting along the whole trail. So there's going to be a mix of conditions, and it's going to depend on a couple of things. One, the conditions on the ground, the amount of use, as well as what the community wants to see in their own community. So those will all be considerations. And then finally, you can see the cute little train there. It's actually very comfortable. They serve beer on board. So potential goals, an important part of starting out here. Again, many communities have been having these conversations locally around trail connectivity within their communities for a long time that have involved this corridor. We're having the regional conversation today, but as Senator McGuire said, we're going to be, or the Senator and his staff are going to be meeting with folks all across this rail line to have conversations about goals, existing conditions, et cetera. So this is really the beginning, and the key thing here is that these potential goals point to a variety of benefits to local communities. You have the safety and privacy of adjacent landowners. You have access and mobility. I think that's a really important one, that when these are constructed within communities, you provide not just a regional trail experience for folks who want to hike or bike, 280 miles, but you're actually helping people with a variety of levels of personal mobility to get from point A to point B, to get to the grocery store, to get downtown. You have the economic benefits. You also have public safety and emergency vehicle access. And you also have important things like, you have a corridor and the ability for, say, the local municipality to get to a certain location to maintain whatever piece of infrastructure they need to. So there's a local convenience factor. So next steps, at a high level, you all again probably know this from participating with local planning processes, but there's sort of a process of looking at existing conditions, working closely with community every step along the way, and then taking all that information and using that to inform trail design, trail location. Do you have a braided corridor? Do you have a single type of trail that meets a lot of different needs? And then that gets into the engineering construction. All along the way, you're looking at funding and the feasibility and the prioritization of what you build first, what you build next, depending on how things are fleshing out. So this is just another diagram put together actually by Alta Planning and Design, and you can just see along each step of the way there's public input. This is part of the process.
About 2 minutes.
2 minutes, great. So trail uses, how do we figure this out? There are a couple ways. One, during the existing conditions, you're looking at who's using the trail, who wants to use the trail, and also are there existing plans in place that determine who uses that trail. Sometimes communities or regions have existing trail plans. That could be something like the Wilderness Act that tells you, who can and can't use that area depending on how they're using it. And then all of that informs trail design. I'm not exactly sure how such a tiny excavator can do that. It's no wonder sometimes our staff roll over in their equipment. And then on the bottom, after the fact, you have a combination of trail uses coming together. You have education. You're actually managing how people interact on an ongoing basis once they're actually using the trail. And that gets into trail safety and protection. And this is really one of the most common concerns of neighboring landowners as well as trail users, is how is our safety going to be protected? And there are a variety of ways. Again, improving this corridor allows for more emergency services, more responsiveness. It allows for better patrolling of the corridor and all kinds of other things. There are also, our amazing local group is the Volunteer Trail Stewards, which has now been around for a number of years. And they act as both eyes and ears on the ground as well as trail maintenance to keep the trails beautiful and functional. So there are a lot of different opportunities to address this. This is just a quick estimate that Alta Planning and Design came up with, and this is not including the Eel River Canyon, it's just for the peg segments. And they estimate, actually, this is conservative, that with what's been built already, possibly 1.2 million users a year are using those segments across this corridor. So you can imagine as you connect this, you start to market it across the country or the world as a regional trail experience. That's bringing a lot of people in these local communities to generate tourism dollars, which is really exciting. $10 million a year estimated currently with these segments. And then finally, you're all familiar with a variety of trail designs and trail looks. You have wider natural surface trails, you have narrow and single track trails, and then you have a variety of different paved trails that can be designed to provide that sort of soft surface, hard surface feel. These may provide better for mobility within communities. And the one thing I just want to point out here, these are some Alta designs. Here, just skip back real quick. These, the only thing I want to emphasize is that there's a real opportunity here, and this is actually, for me, oftentimes one of the most exciting opportunities, which is that when you're designing a trail, oftentimes communities have designed their local segments of trail, but when you're thinking about this regionally, you have an opportunity to tie together a regional vision of the corridor and what it stands for, the history, the culture, the opportunity with the local community. And it's really an opportunity for every local community to take a moment and identify who they are and how they want to speak about their community to trail users. And so as we move forward, there will be great opportunities to do that here as well as up and down this corridor. And I just want to thank you. This is really exciting to be here with you today.
Kevin, thank you so much, my man, and wonderful job. and grateful to be able to provide some pictures to what this vision could potentially be. Ladies and gentlemen, what we'd like to be able to do, and this is going to be our last deep dive of the day, I promise, and then get to your feedback and our conversation. We'd like to be able to do a quick overview and details of the Great Redwood Trail process and cover A through E on our agenda. So let's jump right into item number 5, an update on the 2 pieces of legislation. That's Senate Bill 1029 and Senate Bill 356. What the heck have they accomplished, and what the hell are they going to do? So number 1 on Senate Bill 1029, which was passed last year, it was the NCRA Closure and Transition to Trail Act, and it was signed by Governor Brown. And since that time, I got to tell you, it has been busy, and a lot of things have happened to help make the Great Redwood Trail a reality. Number 1, we've been working with Governor Newsom's office, and we've secured $3 million to ensure that SB 1029 and the closing of NCRA and turning the railroad into trails is actually going to move forward. And that is in this year's budget. So that's good news. Number 2, SB 1029 required a thorough analysis of NCRA's significant and sometimes controversial debt. And the administration has hired a point person to coordinate all the assessments, and an audit has been launched, and it's expected to be completed of June 2020. Here's the importance of that audit. This is the beginning of the end for this functionally bankrupt public agency. And this audit has to be completed until the final shutdown plan. So that is our last step, and that should be completed by June of 2020. You've just heard that $32 million has been secured from both the Metropolitan Transportation Commission and the California Transportation Commission to begin the work on segments of what will begin the Great Redwood Trail. And I'm not going to go into each of those segments since our earlier speakers did such an eloquent job. And we're going to continue to work with rail agencies up and down the rail line to ensure that they have the resources they need to be able to complete their individual trail segments. So let's talk about Senate Bill 356. That is what is moving right now in the state legislature. The Senate Transportation Committee just passed Senate Bill 356 on a bipartisan 12-0 vote. This bill will assign, absolutely, it's going to assign the successor agencies once NCRA closes down. Who is going to be the agency to be able to manage the trail system? The successor agencies will then work together to focus exclusively on the Great Redwood Trail management. So what is going to happen with the North Coast Railroad Authority, NCRA? Under current law, NCRA is no longer a freight rail agency. Their new mission is transition to trails. In other words, their job is to be able to work with trail organizations like we have here today on the Great Redwood Trail, establish a plan to transfer the right-of-way to the authority that is then going to build the trail and then close them down. It's taken a while, candidly, for NCRA to be able to grasp its new mission under the law, but I got to tell you, the board has embraced it, and they are now moving quickly, and we are grateful for the partnership. After nearly a decade of nonstop litigation that went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, NCRA has just settled the lawsuit over their poorly done environmental impact report. That EIR was for the rebuilding of the entire 300-mile-long rail line. And it was a huge step. Getting this settlement was a huge step in bringing NCRA back to the reality most everyone else has long recognized. And we are working closely with NCRA on their new mission. And so is the State Department of Transportation and the California Transportation Commission. Virtually every decision now that the NCRA makes from this January going forward must be reviewed and approved by the state to make sure it's in line with that original bill, Senate Bill 1029. NCRA, heck yes. NCRA legal staff is also working on rail banking the right-of-way from Willits to Samoa, and we'll be moving forward quickly with this federal process. So let's take a look now. Again, we're going to speed this up, I promise you, but I want to make sure that we're all leaving today knowing what's going to be happening over the next 12 months and the next few years with the Great Redwood Trail. Number one, we know that building the entire trail will not be quick, and it's not going to be easy. It is a monster undertaking. And it has to be done carefully, not fast. It has to be done right. The good news is we're already ahead of the game on our internal timeline. But we know that it's going to take many, many years to be able to complete the trail. That said, we're laying the foundation for a successful build-out, and we have 4 important projects that's planned for this year. Here we go. Number 1. Right now, we're working on rail banking the line all the way from Willits north to Samoa. This is a formal application process with the Federal Surface Transportation Board, and we're applying to secure the entire rail line for rail banking even as we speak. Number 2, we're launching a boundary survey to survey the entire line. We believe that there are approximately 1,900 property owners from Humboldt Bay all the way down to San Francisco Bay, but we have to survey the entire line to confirm that fact. So we know who we need to work with as the construction advances. Number 3, we're launching a trail-wide assessment. And by the way, the boundary survey and the assessment has already been funded. So here's what the trail assessment is going to do. The easiest way to be able to build the trail is on top of the current railroad tracks within the current right-of-way. But we know this is going to be impossible in some locations due to the geography, landslides like we just saw, and cost. And we know that there are going to be places within the right-of-way where it makes more sense to move off of the right-of-way and align it elsewhere for that portion of the trail. The trail assessment is really going to help us make critical alignment decisions in the future. Number 4, in this year, as previously mentioned, our 4th goal of the year is to kick off the financial audit, which will wind down NCRA, and that's going to be beginning shortly, and will wind down by June of 2020. Number 5, talking about here in the next couple to 3 years, we're going to be launching the Trail Master Plan. Think of this as the roadmap for the Great Redwood Trail. The master plan is going to provide us with a firm construction budget, an ongoing operations and maintenance budget in the coming year or 2. So that's going to assist us to be able to determine the total number, the total financial obligation we are going to need to be able to build out all segments of the Great Redwood Trail. So who the heck is going to build the trail and who's going to own the trail? There are a lot of options that we have, and there are a lot of options about who will own the right-of-way after NCRA closes down and who will actually do the master planning process to build the trail. It's obvious and a concern of ours, and I think it's a concern of all of you, using a startup regional authority could have challenges. So we're looking to transfer the property, most likely to the state of California or to an existing successful agency. There are several statewide organizations that can master plan and build trails, including the state or the Coastal Conservancy. There are also a few others that we're in discussions with. And that's why we're here today. We'd love to be able to hear your thoughts as to who would be the best to be able to begin the master plan work as well as the construction of the trail. Let's address another question that we're getting a lot of. And again, I apologize. I never want to talk this much ever, and I apologize, and we're almost there, but just want to address a few other questions if that's okay with you. All right, real quick. Why can't we have rails with trails? First off, reason being, number 1, NCRA is no longer a rail agency. NCRA no longer has any mission to create railroads. NCRA is now solely focused on shutting themselves down and transitioning the right-of-way to the Great Redwood Trail. They're in the process of rail banking the line, as we said, from Willits to Samoa, and that will preclude rail service. But let's face it, there is no chance of rail north of Cloverdale for the foreseeable future. And when you look at the costs, of placing a trail next to a rail, instead of putting a trail on top of a rail, the cost goes up dramatically. In fact, it's going to go up by 40 to 100% when it comes to the construction phase of this project. The rail is simply not usable, and it would be a complete waste of taxpayers' money to try anything differently. And even if this was not the case, there is no money. And I want to be very clear. There's no money from the state, and definitely from the federal government at this time, to be able to invest in a private rail line. It will not happen. And there hasn't been money for decades, and there won't be money for the foreseeable future. But we know there are hundreds of millions of dollars out there, even as we speak, to be able to complete trails. And we'd like to be able to set this in stone. We are going to encourage the successor agency who will manage the Great Redwood Trail to be able to work with the Timber Heritage Association. We want to be able to continue their fantastic speeder program that they have continued to run over the past many years successfully in Humboldt. Any rail-based recreation that can be funded and does not interfere with the trail will be encouraged, and you have our word that we're going to be working with the Timber Heritage Association to be able to continue their speeder program, because we believe it is absolutely compatible with the recreation component of the Great Redwood Trail. So, absolutely. So finally, I want to talk about how the trail is going to be a good neighbor, because we have heard some concerns about folks walking up the trail. So we are not reinventing the wheel when it comes to being a good neighbor. Tens of thousands of suburban and rural trails have been built and are operating successfully here in California and around the U.S. In every instance, there were serious issues that needed to be addressed and resolved, and that's no different here on the North Coast. I want to go through some of the issues that we have heard and what will be addressed in the months and years to come. And this is no way the only items on the list, but some of the reoccurring, most frequent concerns. Risk of fire, harassments of pets and livestock, increased foot and vehicle traffic, graffiti and vandalism, eminent domain challenges, loitering and illegal camping, litter and garbage, crime, privacy issues, access to drinking water as well as bathrooms, and of course, what's a bit unique to us and not so much Virginia, cannabis grows. So these issues, and I'm sure a lot more, will need to be resolved for many segments of the Great Redwood Trail. And this is why there is going to be a professional master planning process that identifies all of these issues, all these challenges, and works one-on-one with the community, including and especially adjacent landowners, to resolve them. This is a crucial part of the process, and it is going to be done robustly. If you go to the Rails for Trails website, you can go check out how those issues have been resolved hundreds of times across this country. Can we talk about the economics of the trail? Our Senate district is one of the most diverse in the entire state of California. We have the wealthiest county in the state, and we have the two poorest counties in the state. And what we know is that the outdoor recreational economy for the state of California is one of the fastest growing sectors in the Golden State. And the Great Redwood Trail is going to be absolutely beautiful, and it's going to be an economic driver for all the communities it runs through. California's outdoor recreational economy generates about $92 billion a year here in California. It's responsible for 700,000 jobs. It's responsible for $30 billion in wages and brings over $6 billion in tax revenue back to the state and local communities. The economic impact of trails is well documented. Numerous studies have looked at the following items: tourism expenditures, property values, commercial uses, resident expenditures, and what we have found is that there is a net positive on all economic factors when a long-term, longer-range trail is constructed. In fact, the federal government has a 145-page resource book, good times, and it's called The Economic Impacts of Protecting Rivers, Trails, and Greenway Corridors. If you have any doubts about the economics of trails, check it out. It was adopted, this book, and findings by a bipartisan group in Washington, D.C. And here are some of the findings that the federal report has advanced. Trails increase the values of nearby properties, by far. Trails boost spending at local businesses. Communities along trails benefit from the influx of visitors. Trails influence business locations and relocation decisions. In fact, trails revitalize depressed areas, creating a demand for space where there was always vacancy. Trails increase tax revenues in communities in which they're located. Let's give you some specific examples. In Dunedin, Florida, after CSX abandoned their rail line, the downtown went from a 35% storefront vacancy to 100% storefront vacancy with a waiting list for available space. Since the Katy Hiking and Biking Trail opened up in Marthasville, a really small town in Missouri, more than a dozen new businesses have opened and renewed civic pride in that community. The Washington State Trails Plan estimates that trail users in Washington State spend more than $3.4 billion on equipment alone. Some damn expensive tennis shoes. And it generates tax revenues of $13.8 to $27.6 million per year. In the Denver metropolitan area, according to the city of Denver, 73% of real estate agents said a home near a trail is the easiest to sell. So we talk about the positive impacts. We talked about some of the challenges. How the heck are we going to fund it? The good news is this. Again, there's a lot more money available for trails than there has been for trains. Let's just look at the last 4 months. In the last 4 months, $13.3 million for the trail, the Humboldt Bay Trail between Eureka and Arcata. $6.36 million for 1.6 miles of trail in downtown Woodlands. $12.5 million for the Marin sector of the trail. An additional $3 million to be able to do the trail planning. The Great Redwood Trail has strong support in Sacramento. And I do believe you're going to hear some important announcements in the coming 3 months about additional funding that will be secured this year for the Great Redwood Trail. I sit on the budget committee and the subcommittee that oversees budgets for trails and natural resources and transportation. And I assure you, this is one of my top priorities, to be able to find the money to move the Great Redwood Trail forward. And California voters just passed our latest park bond. There are several $100 million solely dedicated for trail construction, operations, and maintenance in that budget that we're going to go after. We're going to go after hard. I'm going to end it here and say this. I apologize that we all went for so long, especially for myself. But what we wanted to be able to do today is show you where we're at today, what the possibilities are, and how we're going to work together in the future. This is just the first time that we're getting together. I promise you, by the end of this process, you're going to be sick of us. Because we are going to be transparent, we're going to be active, we're going to be engaged, and we want your input. That's the only way that this project will be successful. A few thank yous before we open it up to all of you. We want to say thank you to Laura Cohen and Kevin Wright for their great presentations. We want to say thank you to the gentleman to my left who's been running the PowerPoint, Jason Lyles, who's been He has been on a personal mission, and I'm grateful for all your work, Mr. Smiles. I want to say thank you to the County of Humboldt, the Humboldt Trails Council, Redwood Community Action Agency, Humboldt Bay Trail Fund Working Group, the City of Arcata, the City of Eureka, and all of the participating agencies who made today's summit possible. Let's give them a round of applause. Okay, it's now time. Let's open it up for each and every one of you. If you have questions, comments, raise that hand, and we're going to come to you, and we're going to address your concerns and questions. Thomas Witzel is going to be taking notes so that we are making sure that we are capturing all of your comments, along with Carlene Reevish from our office as well. Ma'am, if you don't mind standing, come on up, give us your name, and thank you so much for attending.
I'm Marcella Clem. I'm staff at the Humboldt County Association of Governments. And on the subject of funding, what are your views on Senate Bill 152 that will greatly reduce local government's ability to be successful in the active transportation program?
Senate Bill 152 is the Senator Bell bill, yes. Correct? That has taken amendments.
It's on the last one. It's still not good.
Yeah, okay. So what we'll do is we will definitely sit down and talk with you more about it, if that's okay with you.
I have an appointment in your office next Friday.
All right, we'll see you Friday. Absolutely, I'm looking forward to it. Thank you so much. But what I is on trails, and we're working with the California Transportation on this issue as well. So there's a bill that would transition money that has been dedicated to the state for trails and put it into the regional bucket. And that
Not our original.
No, and that impacts rural California in particular. So that is an issue that we are absolutely working on, and I do believe that we're going to be able to secure significant general fund and park bond revenue, but more to come on that, I promise you.
Thank you.
So thank you so much. All right, we're going to come right over here to this gentleman. Sir, how you doing? Thank you so much for hanging with us today.
I'm not quite sure where to direct this. The video, it was an excellent video, but all of the people were white. And I just noticed that. And I'm not sure where to move with that to make the other 30% of the citizens feel included in the project.
It's a wonderful point. Thank you so much. Give him a round of applause, please. What you're going to see as far as our outreach is working with all communities, working with the Native American and tribal community. We're going to be working with the Latino community as well as the African American community. And what I will say is we have challenges in our state park system. We need to be able to bring communities of color out into the wild and into our state parks and enjoying recreational activities like the Great Redwood Trail. It is absolutely a goal of ours to be able to make this process as inclusive as possible, and that is what you're going to see as we move forward with these community meetings. And we're also going to be doing individual meetings with individual groups as well. Community groups like in downtown San Rafael with the Canal Alliance, which is predominantly Latino, reaching out to the African American community in Marin City. Marin City is predominantly African American, as well as the tribal community up and down the North Coast. So more to come on that, but that is absolutely a goal of ours to make this inclusive as possible. Thank you so much for the comment. I'm going to come right over here. If you don't mind just standing for me, welcome. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thanks everybody. The environmental problem with not just the railroad tracks washing out, but now Myers Flat has some septic community problems, and I thank you for putting out water and bathrooms along the trail as a point of concern, but I don't think we're ready for a whole bunch of tourists just yet, and it's a trickle little trail, you know, like they'll be flying into our airport and stuff, which is great. It'll take time to build up, but as far as our local businesses need supporting too, like to reach out, those little stops along the way, those mom and pops need help. They don't have a lot of resources out there, like our cannabis industry collapsed. So like we need help to get our tourism going with these little places for the rich people to stop along the trail in our cannabis region, or, you know, it's a beautiful place and they'll come for sure, but we don't have the hotels and everything ready to go, just like in Trinidad. You know, we have ecological issues.
Tyrone brings up some really good points. So on the issue of infrastructure. So look, the reason why we need to be able to move forward on this master plan process is because we have to proactively focus on those challenges. So let's talk about infrastructure. We're going to need to be able to determine how many public restrooms that we may need along the trail. We also need to make sure that we have individuals who are going to be servicing those restrooms and patrolling the trail as well. We need to make sure that we have fresh potable water along the trail to be able to provide those who are coming out to hike. We need to be able to work with the business community to ensure that if folks are going to be coming out to do multi-day hikes, maybe it's a hut-to-hut system, or maybe going from B&B to B&B, we have active and engaged partners that we can turn them over. So I will share with you, we are still a while out to be able to open up that corridor. Here's what you're going to see. You're going to see the boundary survey, you're going to see the trail assessment moving forward this year. Most likely next year we're going to be able to do the master plan process. That master plan process is going to take 24 to 36 months, at least. And in the meantime, there will be individual smaller segments that will be completed, like what we're seeing in Willits, 1.6 miles. So Tyrone, you hit the nail on the head. I completely agree with you. And I still think that we are years away from being able to open up the Great Redwood Trail. And it's going to take time, and you have my commitment, because the last thing we want to do is set up a system that is going to be destined for failure because they don't have long-term funding, we don't have the infrastructure plan in place. I promise you it is going to be, our philosophy is this: do it right, not fast. So that's going to be what we're going to focus on. Does that hit the nail? Thank you so much. I'm going to come on back here. Yes, please. Sir, welcome, and thank you so much for hanging with us today.
And I'm actually an Oregonian, so sorry about that. But I started building rail riders in Oregon. We now have, in 5 years, we've set up in 4 different sites. And we ran close to 30,000 people last year. And those people all get off our rail riders and they run out and they buy stuff from the locals. And the locals, they want me to run longer. So what I'm saying is, like right here, you've got a really good section of rail left that you can do rail riders, and that'll bring 15,000 people a year right into this community, handing out cash and staying another night. But you've got how many communities down through there? So your eye here, who's trying to start rail riders, he needs to start a whole string of them. And California will be pretty darn famous for it. I mean, I've had people from the East Coast, I've had people from Europe actually show up to do this because it's a strange and different, really fun thing to do. And there's a big opportunity here to start a string of them, a string of jewels on your jewel. So I hate to suggest that to California because I'm an Oregonian first, but there is a real opportunity here.
No, thank you so much. And look, you bring up a wonderful point. So whether it's rail riders or whether it's speeders, we want to be able to leave portions of track available to be able to have that as a complement to the experience of the Great Redwood Trail. So right now, if there is a specific idea that an individual has, whether it's for a certain segment for a speeder or a certain segment for a rail rider, what we would encourage you to do to be able to turn in that application to the NCRA board. The NCRA board would then evaluate that and then lift it up through the state. I'll be honest with you, and again, always want to be candid. We're in a little bit of an awkward phase at this moment. The reason why I'm saying that we're in a little bit of an awkward phase is over the next couple of years, we're in a transition phase where you're seeing the NCRA transitioning, winding down, then there's going to be the state, and then we're going to have that new successor agency. So right now, it's a little bit of awkward phase. So if you want to put an application in for a rail rider or a speeder, it's going to go to the NCRA board, and then it will go to the State Department of Transportation and the California Transportation Commission. You're going to need 3 approvals. Now, once we're able to get through this transition phase, we'll have one local agency with local board members, our neighbors, making decisions. But we encourage anyone who has a project, speeder, a rider, to please submit that application now. And Mr. Driscoll and I want to say thank you to Mr. Driscoll for all of his work, by the way, here on the North Coast on this issue. We talked a couple of weeks ago, and we're going to talk again, and be able to submit that application to the NCRA board. But thank you so much, and we welcome anyone and everyone, and go Ducks. All right, so I'm going to come on right over here. Yes, sir. Or Beavers, absolutely.
My name is Dan O'Leary, and there's a man here that's in the Coast Guard named Norman Ehrlich. He was in the Coast Guard during Vietnam, and he met me. I had a brain hemorrhage. I was in a coma for 29 days in 2009, and it was magical. And I saw my grandmother. I'm like, hey, Grandma, you gotta go. And she said I had to go, and I realized that life is beautiful. Put a helmet on. Not because you want to look cool or mess your hair up, or it was a really adventure to have 1.7, and I would have died if I got to 2. And I want you to all to put a helmet on, and you can fall down, and you can hit your head, and you can get back up, and you can look at your helmet like I did. I had a helmet on, I was on a skateboard, I went to the VA for an appointment, and I hit a little rock, and I hit the ground, and the helmet was broken in the back. I split the helmet. Thank you, bro.
No, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ian. Thank you for coming to also talk about that. Thank you so much to Norm as well. Nice job. Thank you so much. You gave that question. Please come on up.
Yeah, I just want to clarify, is the Annie Mary part of the rail banking out to Corbell? Because you said north of Samoa to Samoa, but you haven't said Corbell.
So yes, that is going to be looking, that's what we're looking at, part of the rail banking. Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm going to come right over here. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator McGuire, for being here. Karen Underwood from the Humboldt. Karen Underwood from the Humboldt Trails Council, and I just, in the spirit of instant instant gratification. What can we trail users do now in order to move this forward? Would it help for more letters for SB3, what is it, 356?
Yes.
Yes. So is that something we can do? Do you have any suggestions for things we can do now, since this is such a long process?
I want to say thank you to Ms. Underwood and the Trails Council for all their work and their advocacy. Thank you so much. And I got to tell you, it would not be happening without you. So very, very grateful. Thank you. Yes, so we need advocacy in two different ways. Number one, to be able to get this bill passed because it is instrumental in going to the next step in being able to name the successor agencies. So Jason Lyles is going to be following up on our next committee. Our next committee will be the Appropriations Committee, and we'd love it if we can get emails and letters into them as soon as possible. Yep, and we'll get you the contact information. And the second piece is on the budget allocation. We're looking for additional budget to be able to move to the next phase in the master plan and to be able to buy down some of these debts that we have. Because we also, again, the other challenge that we have is that we're going to have to be able to erase the debts. It's in the state constitution is you can't get rid of an agency without erasing its debts. So that's the other issue that we're going to have to unfortunately tackle. Our first plan, at least this year, let's get some additional infrastructure dough in. So we'll work with you on that and getting advocacy to the budget committee. Does that make sense? Yes. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Yes, I'm going to come right over here. If you don't mind standing, thank you so much for hanging with us and your patience this morning.
Hi, I really appreciate this opportunity for us to learn more about the Great Redwood Trail. What I'd like to know is a little bit more about the successor agencies. You mentioned state, that's big. Are you talking state of transportation, state parks? If you could, when you say state, what does that mean?
It's a great question. Thank you very much. So look, there's going to be, I'm going to take it in two different segments, if that's okay. So under the current Senate bill that is moving now, what would happen is from Willits south all the way to Larkspur would be transitioned to SMART, the Sonoma Marin Area Rail Transit. SMART is publicly funded and it has passenger rail service. By local law, they have to be able to build trails with their rails. That was part of the initiative that voters passed. So Willits South, if this bill passes, will be able to transition to SMART. Willits North will be to be decided. There will be an interim period though. So between now and June 2020, NCRA will be wound down. We're going to be completing the audit. We have to complete the audit of the NCRA between now and June 2020. Once they're wound down, there will be an interim agency. That interim agency will be focused on the master plan as well as the initial build-out. We are then going to need to be able to name that new successor agency. So at this point in time, it's to be determined. The state, I will tell you, the state does not want to hold this long-term. And the state agrees that decisions should be made by those who are as part of the territory of the Great Redwood Trail. So we'll be appointing a new successor agency, similar to what you have with the NCRA, with local faces that you can be able to work with on a daily basis.
So it might be a completely new agency, is that?
It will be a new agency, yes, solely dedicated to trails and the operations and maintenance. It will be a new agency, you're spot on, and you just said what I said in 10 seconds. It took me 2 minutes, so thank you, and I apologize. Nice work, and you're gonna have to come on the road with us, by the way. So thank you very much. I'm heading on over, and I really want to say thank you for hanging with us and for your patience. It's good to see you.
Yes, thank you for coming here. And just a couple of questions. What is happening with NWPCO? And what about the idea of turning the trail into a state park?
Hot damn. All right. So I'm going to take NWPCO in the state park. Is that cool with you? Okay. So NWPCO, Northwest Pacific Company, is the actual freight operator that has a 99-year lease on a 90-year lease on the line. So last year's budget had funding in it to be able to potentially buy them out of their lease. So, SMART is currently negotiating with NWPCO. The furthest north that NWPCO has freight trains is coming into Petaluma. SMART and NWPCO have been negotiating now for 10, 12 months. If they can't come to a conclusion, this is all what it means. Instead of dealing with one agency, SMART, who would run both passenger and freight, we would deal with two agencies, SMART and NWPCO. We're not involved in those negotiations. It's directly between SMART and NWPCO, and that is still to be determined. But they are actively engaged in those negotiations right now.
Is that for the whole line or the southern end?
Southern end. Yeah, I mean, it would essentially buy out the whole line, right? Because they have the whole line, but practically in speaking, they're only operating in the southern end. But yes, it would buy out the whole line. And then let's talk about state parks. Is that okay? So the question was, what the heck, why don't we get state parks to be able to run the GRTA, the Great Redwood Trail Authority? Long story short, that could be a possibility, but what I will say is, and again, this is still not at all trying to be squishy with you, because ultimately this has to be a local decision. Do you want locals to be able to run this, or do you want the state? I err on the side of, I think we should have locals making decisions on infrastructure that's running through our communities, but that would be me, and that could be a possibility in the interim. But that decision has not been made yet at all, and we want to be able to hear from you. And as you all stand up today, do you want to see locals? Do you want to see the state? We'd love to be able to get your feedback on that, because that's still to be determined. I'm going to come right up here to this gentleman. How's it going, sir? Nice to see you.
Thank you for coming up here. My name is Glenn. You mentioned that NCRA has tremendous debt. First of all, how much debt is that? And do you see that as a hurdle for transitioning from their authority to the next agency that will take over?
Great question. Thank you. So we estimate the debt is around 10 to 12 million. So we're going to have to tackle that here in the next 2 to 3 years. We got it. We can't dissolve a public agency without paying off the debt. We can't. It's against the law. So we're going to have to pay off their debtors, those who we owe, that NCRA owes money to. So is it a challenge? I'm just going to be honest. Nobody wants to have to pay for debt. They all want to put it in infrastructure, but it is an issue that we're going to have to tackle. And yes, before the final wind down, we have to have that financial plan. So we're working on getting those funds as well. So we have 2 parallel tracks. We got to pay off their debt, even though the state didn't incur that, and we got to continue to look at infrastructure funding. Did I answer the question? All right, I'm going to go right over here and to the gentleman, and I'll come back over here. How you doing? Welcome.
Good.
Thank you so much for coming.
Yes, thank you for coming. I'm Patty Clary. I'm from California for Alternatives and Toxics. We're one of the debtors. We just settled with our long lawsuit with NCRA, and we're very proud of it. We succeeded in getting rid of the EIR, but we also kept NCRA off the tracks. So we kept more freight railroad from going in, at least for now. And we also succeeded in exposing a very corrupt agency. So it's going to be gone, and we're very happy about that. But what I'm here to talk about today, so now we're out of that lawsuit, just sucked the life out of us for a while, and now we're looking at the trails. And so I've started reading all the environmental documents that are associated with the trails that have gone in, partials, little segments that have gone in so far, and they're all missing something. Humboldt County's last little piece, that's going to be the connected piece around the bay, is going to, does have some mention of this, and that is the toxic chemicals that are in this rail corridor. There is a lot of evidence to support that there's a lot of toxics in there. There's actually, the state actually sued NCRA for some of it in 1999 and have a settlement, and a lot of things that NCRA was supposed to do and never did do. like monitoring water, monitoring runoff, you know, et cetera, et cetera. Those things haven't happened yet. I'm sure they're going to happen with the Great Redwood Trail. I have a lot of faith that you're going to see that this stuff's going to happen. Right, and I just want to show an example quickly, and then I'll let y'all go. We'll have more information available later, but here is a segment where a segment of trail went in through a wetland in Eureka. You can see the end right here of that portion of the trail. So there was more and had to go through wetland. So there had to be wetland mitigation, which was a little further in this direction toward Blue Ox. There was a machinery came in and dug out a bunch of dirt and moved that dirt. Nobody ever tested that dirt to find out if it had toxic chemicals in it, even though there were sawmills all around the bay that used a lot of toxic chemicals, and the railroad itself did. Here's the dirt. It was taken to the north side of the Samoa Bridge. I think you guys all know where that is. It's big open space where a lot of stuff gets dumped. And we don't know what happened to that dirt. Where did it go? What was in it? And et cetera. And I don't think we want to go forward with doing that anymore. A lot of people are here today that are working on segments of the trail. And I don't think they really have this in their consideration of what they're going to be doing. And I want to encourage them all to be looking for how they're going to handle the dirt, what's in that dirt. Can't just take the toxic stuff and spread it around the countryside without any means of knowing what you have and what you're going to do with it.
Thank you so much, Ms. Clary. Look, I'm very grateful. Thank you for your words as well. So look, as we said in the beginning, this is a long-term project. And there are a lot of items that we're going to need to be able to cover, including what may be buried along the tracks and what may ultimately become the trail. So we have been in constant communication as we've been moving forward, and that communication is going to continue with Clary here over the next months and several years to come. So more to come on that one, and we'll be continuing. I'm going to go right over here to the gentleman. We're going to come right in the back. Come on up, sir. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. You've been talking about successor agencies and local input and so forth. And we do have such an agency here. It's called the Humboldt County Association of Governments. I know Marcel is up there. And the equivalent agency in Santa Cruz oversees their Rail with Trail project. So I'm encouraging you to dialogue with them. And they have asked for a seat at the table, I know.
No, thank you so much. Absolutely. The one item that we're going to need is we're going to need a multi-county board or authority, whatever you all want to call it, right? Because we're going to need to be able to include also Mendocino, as well as potentially Sonoma and Marin. So absolutely, we will be coordinating. You have my word, and we have that note right now with Humboldt governments. Thank you for that. And we have that. Thomas, you got that correct? Thank you so much.
Mike, Pat Higgins, Eel River Recovery Project. I just want to say, go lower Eel Salmon Parkway. Fortuna just loves the idea. They just acquired $600,000 from the state to expand riverfront property there so that they can have a park. Now they want to connect up with the trail route. It's low-hanging fruit. Let's go now.
Thank you so much, Mr. Higgins. Thank you. I'm going to head back to the back of the room here, and I appreciate everyone's patience. How you doing, sir? Mike, the floor is yours.
Just a question. Again, I know it's still early and conceptual, but what would be like the funding mechanisms if you have a regional agency that's going to oversee the trail and maintain it?
Great question. So there's a few items, and this is what the master plan is also going to be developing. And again, I hope I'm not coming off as being coy today, because honestly, we're in the very beginning stages of this, and I don't want to put my foot into this mouth and predetermine. So I'm going to just give you some options. So number one, we could look at some type of, if it is under the auspices of like state parks, and then you have a regional authority that's working with state parks, we could look at some type of continuous appropriation, just like we do with state parks. Number two, we could look at regional governments helping fund, along with some state dollars that would continue to come in. We know that grant dollars for ongoing maintenance and operations is critical, and we've already been contacted by some conservancies and nonprofits that are interested in investing. But all those items regarding how we're gonna fund ongoing operations and maintenance, please stop me if you think I'm wrong, Mike. It's easier to be able to find one-time infrastructure dollars to be able to get it built. We want to set this up for success and financial security with long-term ongoing funds. And that's what the master plan is going to be able to provide us with in regards to the roadmap. And I'm not trying to be squishy with you, sir. So, but those are, yeah. But that is so critical, right? I'm going to keep saying it. I don't mean to sound like a broken record. Do it right, not fast. And that is why it is critical that we get this master plan launched. Thank you so much, Mike. Really good. Thank you. I'm coming straight up here. How you doing, sir? Thanks for hanging.
Carlson, when will we know if the rail banking application for the section from Willits to Samoa is successful?
Thank you so much. It's probably going to take us, I'm going to give you, I want to under-promise, over-deliver, so give you a window, right? So it could probably be about 24 months. We have to still submit the formal application, we meaning working in CRA in the state of California, and it could take 24 months, it could take 36 months. Miles, what do you think? Would that be an accurate-ish?
On the outside, I think we're doing pretty well so far. Up to 12 to 24 months, I think, is accurate.
12 to 24 months. So 12 to 24 months in regards to the rail banking. Thank you so much, Jason Miles. Other questions, comments, concerns that folks would like to be able to address here today?
I got one.
Okay, we're going to come right over here, and then we're going to go to Mr. Driscoll, please.
So what I just want to do is, I want to ask everybody, when we were going through this process to approve 1029, to get the governor to sign it, SB 1029, did people send letters on that to communicate to that? Raise your hand, you did that. I want to let you know that that was crucial. That we would not be here today without the efforts of everybody on that. Because people always ask me, does my letter matter? Does my phone call matter? I want to tell you it really does in the way that you guys did this. It was also true that the connectivity between our communities and the communities of the southern end of this line and the communications between our efforts and theirs also helped put this over the edge. I also want to testify to you that when I was giving testimony to the Transportation Committee last week, I want to let you know that the feedback from that committee was very positive. That there was actually a thank you that came to us, the community, thanking us for the efforts on this visionary process. And that at the state level, this is a recognized effort. We're not isolated in this, and I want you to, and that is because of your efforts. And so I just want to reiterate that when the call goes out again for the next round of support, please do it. It's functional and helpful. I just wanted to testify to that, to my experience in Sacramento and the feedback that I received. So thank you.
Amen. No, thank you so much. And honestly, it's critical that we hear from all of you. And the chair of the Transportation Committee said that to the supervisor about the statewide importance of the trail. Mr. Driscoll.
Thank you very much, Mr. McGuire, Senator McGuire, and for everyone else who's contributed so much towards these efforts. We're really at a unique spot in history, actually. What my question right now, though, is a simple one: is what is our communication corridor towards getting our input and helping this development go forward?
Absolutely. So communication is you can work with our office. I've spoken with some of you in this room. So here are several ways you can communicate with us. You can communicate with our North Coast office, and that's Thomas Witzel. This is Thomas Witzel right here, and I want to say how grateful I am for all of his hard work. We are just across the parking lot with Assembly Member Jim Wood from the Eureka City Hall. You can communicate with me directly via the Sacramento office, and I'm in Humboldt, Trinity Del Norte, Santa Rosa, and Marin. But best way to be able to reach me is through our Sacramento office, and that is 916-651-4002. You can also communicate with Jason Lyles. Jason Lyles is the project manager for our office and is the official go-between with the state as well as the NCRA on our office's behalf. You can reach Jason Lyles at 576-2771 and morning, noon, or night. Okay. 576-2771 in the 707, and that is at our Santa Rosa office. So you can reach us here in Eureka, you can reach us in Sacramento, you can reach us in Santa Rosa. I'm up at least once a month. Jason Lyles is up at least once a month. And Thomas is here constantly and a proud HSU grad. So watch out and go Jacks. So please, anytime you want to be able to get a hold of us, we'd love to be able to hear from you as well. If you do have a specific project that you'd like to be able to focus in on for the rails, it's going to be NCRA and Mitch Stogner. Mitch Stogner is the executive director of NCRA, so if you have a specific project that you'd like to be able to move forward with, you would communicate directly with Mr. Stogner and the NCRA and the NCRA board as well. All right, any last questions that folks may have and would like to be able to do a quick wrap up? Okay, so we're going to turn it over to Ms. Deimer here, who's the city manager of Arcata, in just a moment. But I want to just say how grateful we are that all of you have come out with us on a Saturday morning to be able to talk about this important issue. Here's what you're going to see moving forward between now and December 31st. You're going to see the audit picking up steam to be able to wind down the NCRA. Number two, you're going to see the launch of the trails assessment, looking at the entire rail line and potentially where trails should go and potentially where trails may not be able to go. Number three, you're going to see the boundary survey. That boundary survey will begin this year. You'll be able to determine how many neighbors we have along the Great Redwood Trail. Number four, we're going to be advancing the rail banking process. The rail banking process between between Willits and Samoa. So that will be moving forward as well. In addition, I'll say our fifth is the other piece of legislation, Senate Bill 356. That would be naming SMART, the successor agency from Willits south. Sixth, we are looking for additional budget funding to be able to continue, with trail segments, as well as the wind down and to formally launch the master planning process. The last thing I'll say is this. These are the early days of this project. And what you have is my promise. We are going to involve each and every one of you every step of the way. We're going to be in Mendocino County on June 11th for a similar town hall meeting. And then in the fall, we're going to be in Sonoma and then Marin. We are doing the same thing every year in each of the counties in which the Great Redwood Trail would be located in. And anytime you want to get a hold of us, 707-576-2771. You can get a hold of me at 916-651-4002. 916-651-4002. Or you can stop on by our office right in the same parking lot right there as Eureka City Hall. And come see Thomas as well. All right, without further ado, we'd like to be able to turn it over to the hard-working city manager from the city of Arcata. Let's give a round of applause to Ms. Deimer, please. Come on now. And I want to say thank you for all of your work, and I want to say thank you for coming out. Thank you for your feedback, and we are so excited to work with you in the months and years to come, and we're going to get the damn trail built. So let's turn it over to Ms. Deimer.
Thank you, Senator McGuire. Can we, before we even wrap up quick, really give one more round of applause to our two trail champions. I think you've heard it several times today that the Great Redwood Trail legislation came as a surprise, and not because we hadn't been working hard on the concept, and not because we hadn't had that vision and dream in this area, but because we had worked with many previous senators and assembly members on a concept, maybe not quite as bold as this, but even to take baby steps. But the time wasn't right and the political will wasn't there until Senator McGuire really picked up this effort. So he gave us 6 promises just at the end. I'm going to ask you to do just 3 things to support that. First, I'd really like to ask you to visit one of these stations around the room before you leave. Pick a trail segment that you haven't visited before and get out on our trails. Second, I would like you to stop at the Humboldt Bay Trails booth I would like you to give them a donation to keep our fund growing and building. And third, I just really ask that all of you stay engaged. You heard it from Mike Wilson earlier today, and we've seen it true over and over again in our community. The action of our trail supporters is what has pushed every single segment forward. Hank Seaman's going to need it. He's going to need the support of everyone in this room. We left him the hardest section of trail around Humboldt Bay because we know he is the most talented of all of us. So I'm going to end with a quote today by Hank Seaman. Let's visit the places we love with the people we love on our Humboldt trails. Thank you for coming out today. I'm from your parents. I keep meeting your parents.
I know.
Sweet.